Coming at you from the 37th parallel on America's haunted highway, it's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Good evening and welcome to another spine-tingling adventure with Pixelated Paranormal. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor Thomas. With me as always is a man whose name rhymes with Charlton Heston. You guessed it, it's Preston. Tonight's episode, we have spine-tingling tales to terrify of Pokemon Go, ancient Egypt, Nikola Tesla, and more.
All right.
That's
good.
All right. Well, guys, this is episode 6. We are calling this the season finale for season 1. We will come back again in a couple weeks, starting new things, bigger stories. We don't have Rob with us tonight, unfortunately.
This is the no wood edition.
No wood, wood-free. Don't got to worry about no splinters. So, Rob's taking a little well-deserved R&R, taking a little trip and getting away from the everyday grind. So we wish him a happy and safe trip. Hope he has a good time. And, so it's just the boys tonight.
We got this. No worries.
We've got it. We're in good hands, Rob. Don't you worry. I know the two guys that are hosting the show, and I think they'll do okay. So, I'd say we just jump straight into the news. What says you about that?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay, so we have to talk about the new video game sensation that is sweeping the nation, which is that of Pokemon Go. So we'll go ahead and spill the beans. Neither one of us played this game. I never played Pokemon growing up. I respect it for what it is. I couldn't get into it. Preston, did you ever play it?
No, God, no. It was just... I don't know, it was probably at the tail end of our generation, so it's just one of those things that I could never just really jump on the bandwagon. I've never been a big anime fan to begin with, and it's just, I don't know, that Yu-Gi-Oh! And all those other ones,
Not your cup of tea, eh?
Not my cup of tea.
There you go. I've got plenty of friends who played it in high school who have played Pokemon Go now, and I'll give it credit. That game, the concept is super cool. It's a great idea for a game. The thing about it, if anybody doesn't know anything about it, obviously you catch Pokemon, so you're playing in an augmented reality, so you're going to use your camera phone, and it kind of shows you a little window of everything in the real world that you're seeing in front of you, but then it augments the little Pokemon animals onto your screen, and so as you're walking through the park or through a parlor or a restaurant, in many cases, you can see a little critter scurry across the floor or what have you. You can catch it, you can train it, and you can Pokemon it. So that's pretty neat. But with Pokemon Go, there's been a lot of controversy as far as how good it's going to be for people and how bad it's washing the brains of our children. So I talked to a couple people who play it. We had a guy here in Wichita, I guess, who was watching his screen. As you do, you have to walk to play the game. He was walking down by a river, because that's where you catch the water Pokemon, is down by a river, and wasn't paying attention, and he fell straight into the river. Luckily, he was okay. He didn't get hurt. He did ruin his phone, so that's kind of a bum deal, but such is the life of a Poke trainer, I suppose. But there's been lots of people falling off of curbs, wrecking their bikes, walking into walls, breaking limbs because they're paying more attention to this game. And a lot of people are saying that it's maybe the devil's work, right?
Right. We have Reverend Rick Wiles, who is a self-described conservative Orthodox Christian.
It's a mouthful.
Who on his radio show True News Monday said Pokemon Go sure has made a lot of churches into Pokestops, landmarks where people can pick up virtual tools for the game. Around the U.S., some places of the worship have used this to their advantage, displaying signs inviting players to come in for services while they're there. But Wiles suspects something's far more sinister is afoot. That Pikachu may look cute and friendly, but is probably a cyber demon. The enemy Satan is targeting churches with virtual digital cyber demons, he said, and I believe that this thing is a magnet for demonic powers. He didn't immediately reply to a request for comment, but from post, they replied back that they found a disturbing pattern. Pokemon spells out loud, porn, orgies, Christianity, slightly spelled wrong, edible underwear, mad abortion, orgies again, and no God. Nothing that Pokemon Go app is likely to lead players to Christian churches, while posed a serious question about national security. What if this technology is transferred to Islamic jihadists? Wonder if the Islamic jihadists have an app that shows them where Christians are located geographically. A solid point, since before the game existed, there was literally no way to find these places. Yeah, that's it.
So wait, Pokemon, the word Pokemon spells...
Right, so for P, porn.
Oh, okay, sure.
O, orgies.
Uh-huh.
K, Christianity with a K.
Okay, I got you. I thought they were saying you could spell all those words with the word Pokemon, and I was going to say these must be the worst Boggle players in the history of Boggle, because I can get Poke and Mon, and if I work really hard, I might be able to get Poem. So there you go. Well,
there you go.
So, you can argue that the game's terrible for people just like anything else. You can argue is bad for people. The cool thing about Pokemon Go that I think is you have to walk in order to get this game to do things for you. You got to walk and go find the creatures and whatnot. So you're seeing kids who probably haven't been in the sunlight for years, crawling out of their basements going to play this game. You're getting people to be more active again, which is awesome. I talked to a woman, a complete stranger. She was mentioning how she was going to go play the game, and so I kind of quizzed her a little bit about it and what she thought was cool, what she hated about it. And this, to me, I think is one of the best parts about the game. So she mentioned how she plays it, and her brother did not play it. Her brother was in an accident, had some pretty bad injuries, and so he has spent the last 2 years pretty much not quite bedridden, but, in a chair. He never leaves the house, doesn't get up, and now with his injury, he's pushing about 400 pounds. And so she said she came over one day to visit him, as she often does, and she pulls out her phone and shows him the game. And he's like, hey, that's kind of neat. She goes, well, check it out. There's a Pokemon right now in the living room. And she shows him the screen. He goes, oh, how do you catch it? How do you catch it? So she gives him the phone and he catches it. And, his eyes kind of get a little bit bigger and he kind of gets a little grin on his face. And he's like, okay, well, that's cool. So how do I catch more? She's like, well, you got to get up and find them. She's like, there's one in the living room. Look over there in the living room right now. Go grab one. So he got up out of his chair, which he seldom left, and went in the living room, and he caught one. He started laughing and giggling, and the guy's probably in his 20s or 30s, whatever. That's not a bad thing. So then he got really excited, and he goes, well, where else can I find these things? Just in the house? And she's like, well, no, you got to go outside. You can find water Pokemon by the water, and fire Pokemon by, firehouses, I guess. The rumor is you can find the sleeping Pokemon by, mattress stores. You can even get the ghost Pokemon in graveyards. So it's pretty cool. So she's like, my brother, who has barely left the house at all and gotten no exercise in 2 years, is calling her every day to go on walks. She says they go on 1 to 2 mile walks at a time down at parks, rivers, down in the city, just to go catch Pokemon. She said this guy has not been excited about anything for 2 years. She's never seen him smile or laugh at anything, and now that's become this guy's life. And she's like, that might be a bad thing because it's a video game, but it's a good thing because this guy's, he's 400 pounds, and all of a sudden now he's calling me saying, hey, let's go out, let's go hunt, let's go walk. So what seems like a meager video game is actually getting this guy some pretty good exercise. So, you could argue that maybe it's saving, or if not saving, at least changing his life.
Yeah, for me, my biggest irritation with it is my lady and I were out for lunch the other day.
Right.
And we were at Granite City, and we were, next to the window. And as you're looking out the window, there's, a Target and a bunch of other, shopping complexes. And we actually saw several, maybe 5 people stop their car, get out to catch this fucking Pokemon. And they're disrupting traffic. People are sitting there honking the horn, waiting and crap. And it's just what the fuck what are we doing with our society? For us to just stop in the middle of exiting, a parking lot or whatever, just to catch a damn Pokemon. Or I found this photo from My Family's Pizza, which is a local pizza restaurant, that was Pokemon trainers. We know catching and battling makes all of us hungry, and we have rewards set up for you based on your Go level. Level 3 equals free soda. Level 5, get a free slice of pizza. Level 8, get an 8-inch pizza for free. Level 21, you guessed it, free 12-inch pizza on us. And it's small businesses can take advantage of this, and just like the article, like churches can take advantage of this. You know, I don't know. It's just like for me, I just with technology, just I don't know. It irks me. Like we should be up, we should be active in the communities. We should be doing all these things without having a video game to be the incentive.
You're such an old fart.
I know.
Well, you know, like you mentioned, like you got that pizza parlor. There's a restaurant here in town called Taste and See, which is a pretty sweet, kind of an avant-garde type place. The owner, by the way, is truly one of the coolest, nicest people I've ever met. He's a super cool guy. He's got a wonderful restaurant. Anyway, he posted a picture of himself in his kitchen getting ready to pounce on this bat. So I assume they took like a screenshot. And then he just posted a picture on Facebook saying, you know, stop on in for lunch today and catch some Pokemon. We've got plenty of them kind of flying around. So that's kind of cool in a way. People are going to use this to their advantage. And the game's getting people who would otherwise not speak to each other or not spend any time together, complete strangers, talking and conversing and getting out together. So I see what you're saying. It's disrupting everything, but maybe it could be a good thing. Or maybe not.
Well, you know what? The premise behind Terminator Genesis was that this one application connected all of our lives socially. And look what the fuck happened in that movie. Skynet took over. Okay?
There you go.
I'm just saying, instead of Skynet being Genesis, Skynet in this timeline is Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go. Okay, well, we'll get back on track here with morbid stuff. So my question to everybody playing this game is, obviously you've got people, you know, falling off curbs, breaking fingers and arms and running into walls, falling in rivers. How soon do you think it's going to be before we have a headline news article saying local man dies in Pokemon Go related accident? Because there have been people who have gotten hit by cars. Nobody's passed away, thank God, yet. But people have been seriously injured. A guy got hit by a car because he was running out in traffic. Just like you said, people are stopping traffic. How long do you think it's going to be? Do you think we're going to see somebody who is fatally wounded, injured?
Definitely. I mean, I think that you have like a middle school kid or like a young kid who's got a phone who's going to get wrapped up in this game and then not paying attention. And then, you know, that accident's going to happen where he's going to get hit by a car or fall off of something and, you know, fatally, you know, hurt themselves. So give it.
There you go.
You don't have to give it that much time, you know, maybe 6 months, 7 months down the road. I think those stories are going to start coming in.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so, okay, back to our news. What I was getting at is, I asked that question to everybody, how soon before someone's gonna, you know, pass away, someone's gonna die from this, unfortunately. And I was turned on to a news story from just a couple days ago. In Riverton, Wyoming, a 19-year-old girl was out playing Pokemon Go, and she was, I'm going to assume, in some wooded area, we'll say, the woods, and she was walking down by a body of water, like a river. And she's okay. Nothing happened to her, so I'll tell you that up front. But while she was looking through her camera phone, trying to catch, I don't know, a Squirtle or whatever fishy Pokemon there are, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She happened to look over and found a dead body floating in the water next to her.
Ugh.
The body was not... however the person died was not related to Pokemon Go, so that's a good thing. It's sad somebody passed away, they lost a life, but it wasn't related to Pokemon. But that's the way the news article is reading, is 19-year-old girl hunts for Pokemon and instead finds a dead body. So police said that the body was most likely placed there sometime shortly before the girl arrived, coincidentally, and she just happened to stumble upon it. The girl wasn't involved, they can't find any foul play, but yeah. A girl went looking for a Squirtle and found a dead body.
I can just imagine, like, right now that, like, unbeknownst to us, like, Pokemon Go somehow tied into 411 missing cases. Like, whatever's behind 411 has, you know, come up with this Pokemon Go, and then it's going to, like, all these little kids that are playing it are just going to be like, I'm trying to find a Squirtle in the forest, and then bam! More missing cases. So, don't download and don't give in. Don't do it.
I'll end our Pokemon chat on this final note. My favorite tweet I've read so far by a Pokemon trainer is, this guy says, "It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm 37 years old. I'm in my neighbor's backyard wearing nothing but my boxer shorts, trying to catch an imaginary animal. I should probably rethink my life's decisions." So I think it's kind of funny that, you know, you might look out the back window of your bathroom and see somebody in your yard, and in reality, they're not trying to catch a peek at you. They're just trying to catch that Pikachu.
Ooh.
Well, what have you got from the news?
So my first news article is going to be final proof that life exists on Mars. Now, we're going to link to this story in the show note, and this is from the Express UK. There's going to be a link in this article to a YouTube video, and you should all watch it. Basically, Scott C. Warning, editor of UFO Sightings Daily, said that this is enough evidence to rock the paleontology world off his high horse. The skeletal remains of a living creature on Mars was found, and this video proves it. It could be an intelligent species, one of the creatures that control this planet, an extraordinary and unusual find that should change how we will view Mars forever. So basically, I think this is the same guy we talked about in like show 2 or show 3 that was all obsessed with like, oh my God, I found crabs on Mars. That just proves that there's life, and this one's a squirrel.
They're Pokemon on the moon.
So, he's like, this is undoubtedly the skeletal remains of a humanoid, in my opinion. I've cross-referenced the relic remains and compared them to bones, and I swear to God, this is a human skeleton. Oh, my man, I don't know. This is a tough one because I'm looking at it, and some of the rocks look like bone-like stuff. The rest of it looks like fucking rocks.
Like rock-like stuff?
Yeah, rock-like stuff. So I don't know if this is really the final proof that we need, but, it's an interesting little look, so.
That links kind of right into my last news story. Apparently on June 9th, NASA had their national broadcast of the space stations and whatnot. And apparently during their broadcast, they reportedly saw a UFO. And this isn't the first time it's happened. They've seen, UFOs, unidentified flying objects, before on their screen. But I guess in this case, they had the live feed going, and you can see this lit up, we'll call it a ball or an object, kind of come into screen and start lowering itself down like it's getting ready to enter the Earth's atmosphere. And right before it kind of approaches the Earth, they cut away the feed real quick and say they're having technical difficulties. That's been headline news, with a lot of people saying, oh no, I worked for NASA and there was nothing going on. My cousin works for NASA and he said everything's fine. So they're acknowledging they saw an anomaly, but they're not touching base anymore on that. They're just saying, oh, we were having some issues with some, technical equipment, and we just had to cut away. So we're really sorry about that. So what they're saying is they may have caught a UFO entering the Earth's atmosphere.
It's about damn time. They keep saying that this is the year for disclosure, so Obama's going to come out and tell us all we need to know.
There you go.
There you go.
So tell me about what's going to happen on the 29th.
Well, according to Doomsday soothsayers, or the all those people that I can't remember, the article doesn't say what group it is, but you remember last year how there was the group of people that said that Costa Rica was going to be destroyed by a comet for being sinners and whatnot. And basically they are back at it again, and it's the same thing. The poles are going to shift, so we don't have to worry this year, Sean. You don't have to worry about buying me a Christmas present, or, really buying anybody a Christmas present, because July 29th, we are all screwed. Cities will collapse due to the Earth's magnetic poles reversing. And then a really, really, really angry Jesus is going to arrive and kill everyone except Christians who watch a lot of those videos on YouTube, who will be saved. This is actually, hold on, by End Time Prophecies. And earlier this year, they stated that an asteroid would hit the U.S. on May 6th. Didn't happen. And they also had a prediction that Barack Obama would reveal that he's the Antichrist in the beginning of June, which he didn't. So I am pretty positive, just like, I'm just going to go throw it out here 100% sure that this is not going to happen and we're going to be okay. But if I'm wrong, I'll see you guys on the flip side.
I think that's all we got for the news, right? That's all you got? I'm going to jump into another cataclysmic event called the Tunguska Event. Now, I'm not sure if anybody else is familiar with this. I sure as hell wasn't. I'd never heard of it until a few days ago. But basically, back on June 30th, 1908, at about 7:17 a.m., there was an explosion, an anomaly we're going to call it, in Russia. I believe right around Siberia, if I remember right, where an explosion occurred, flattening over 2,000 kilometers of forest, killing countless fauna, but no humans were injured because of the area it happened. It was a sparsely populated area. No humans were reported being injured. But what they're saying is this random explosion, which they still don't really have much of a concrete explanation for, leveled over 80 million trees. They're saying this random explosion, reportedly kind of coming from nowhere, says that the shock waves equaled that of about a level 5 on a Richter scale, and it's been the largest impact event ever recorded in human history. Theorists say that it could have been a meteor, or it could have been an asteroid or something, but they said that the odd thing about this explosion that happened, that kind of damage, they never found any asteroid, they never found any craters, or they kind of have picked out a impact point, supposedly, but they really have no explanation of what happened. The earliest theorists said that the impact or explosion equaled that of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT going off. Now, we're going to scale that back a bit because that's just silly. Modern day supercomputers have calculated that the explosion really was only that of about 3 to 5 megatons, so that still means, holy shit, it's a big explosion. 15 megatons is equal to about the energy put out, I think, 1,000 times greater than the atomic bomb that dropped on Hiroshima. They've got a quote here. There was a guy who made a report. He says, "At breakfast time, I was sitting by the house in Vanavara Trading Post, about 40 miles south of the explosion, facing north. I suddenly saw that directly to the north, over Onkul's Tunguska Road, the sky split into two, and fire appeared high and wide over the forest. The split in the sky grew larger. The entire northern side was covered with fire. At that moment, I became so hot that I couldn't bear it, as if my shirt was on fire. From the northern side, where the fire was coming from, also came a strong heat. I wanted to tear off my shirt and throw it down, but then the sky shut closed, and a strong thump sounded, and I was thrown a few meters off of my stool. I lost my senses for a moment, but then my wife ran out and led me into the house. After that, such a noise came. I pressed my head down, fearing rocks would smash it. When the sky opened up, hot wind raced between the houses, like from a cannon, which left traces in the ground like pathways, and it damaged some crops. Later we saw that many windows were shattered, and on our barn, part of the iron lock had snapped off." So this explosion, in other words, was freaking huge. So you fast forward to, almost 100 years later. In 2007, scientists are believing now that they found a lake in Tunguska, which is called Lake Checo, or Lake Chico, which could be a crater from a piece of a meteor that may have split off from the larger portion that was still in space. And they're saying that such a meteor could have gone across the Earth's atmosphere and exploded and just sent a single shockwave down to that one point. As odd as that might sound, it's very, very strange just to have one concentrated blast like that. But they're saying part of a meteor could have split off of this asteroid and come down, causing a crater that was around 5 miles across, and that then filled up with water and became what we call Lake Checo. What do you think about that? Big, big explosion.
I think that's feasible because I know, they talked about how in years past how a comet could explode mid-air, and that would accommodate for a lot of the reports on what happened in Tunguska. Now, there was also reports over the years, like when scientists were heading out there. I don't know if it's the actual lake, but somewhere around there's like a marsh, and the radiation levels in that marsh are very high today, almost like at Chernobyl type of radiation levels, and people would get sick really quick. And then they reported finding these large metal domes all over the place, almost like mushroom caps. They would look like mushrooms.
Really?
Yes, and these the natives in that area said that the domes have always been there, and that they were left by these people as protection. And they reported that these lights and lightning and stuff would fly out of these domes and shoot at things. So the ancient astronauts or the people who go along the lines of it was a crashed spaceship or whatever, that something entered the Earth's atmosphere around that area, and as a defense mechanism, these metal mushrooms or whatever they were opened up and fired out some type of laser bolt and exploded it, and that caused a kind of like a bomb reaction, and that's what exploded across the sky and caused that explosion. I don't know. That sounds cooler. I mean, that sounds like a really great Hollywood movie script, and we're going to go with that because a fucking meteorite is just lame. Okay, that's lame-ass lame.
The astrophysicist by the name of Wolfgang Kund has a different proposal that he thinks was actually what caused it. He says that he believes a subsequent explosion of 10 million tons of natural gas coming out of the Earth's crust could be the reason why we had the explosion. The basic idea is that natural gas leaked out of the crust and then rose to probably its equal density height in the atmosphere. Then it drifted downward, kind of like forming a wick or a fuse maybe, which eventually found an ignition source, probably like lightning or something else. Once the gas was ignited, the fire streaked across the sky, thus causing your sky to light up like everybody reports. And then the explosion then arced downwards, straight down to wherever in the ground the gas was leaking from, ergo right in the middle of Tunguska, which then caused the giant explosion. And since it was more or less just, kind of like I said earlier, like TNT going off, it wouldn't necessarily create a crater, but just a very large explosion, thus leveling out, 80 million trees. So the only other thing I could find really recently that's happened similar to that, and you may remember back in Russia, I think, back in February 2013, they said that there was also an explosion. A meteor had flown by, actually an asteroid, I think, that was about 17 to 20 meters across, I think they said. And when it exploded, it caused an initial mass of about 11,000 tons of explosive power, then causing a bunch of buildings to shatter, windows to blow out, causing, I think, over 1,000 different injuries, mainly from broken glass coming out of like cars and nearby buildings and whatnot. But I remember seeing that on the news, but of course that one has a well-defined reason for what happened.
There's also, is it earlier this year and like last year, reports of those in Siberia, just these like giant holes just opening up in the earth where there used to be permafrost. And their explanation was basically these were underground pockets of methane, and that as the Earth is heating up now and our overall climate's getting warmer, it's causing the ice to kind of weaken and push back, and then the methane explodes up, causing these giant 300, 400 foot craters in the ground. And that's kind of going back to this one scientist's explanation that you found on what he thought might have caused the event a couple hundred years ago. So.
Well, let's move right away from Russia and go straight into Egypt.
Okay.
How's that sound? Take it away.
So I'm going to talk about the pyramid effect, or what they call like the power pyramid. And this is going to start off in what we call the Band of Peace, which is about 22 ruins that run north to south in Egypt. There's 6 major ones that if you look up, this is where you're going to find the most information. So I'm going to go over those real quick. So the first one is Abu Rawash. Second is Giza. Then we have Abu Ghurab, Abshur, Saqqara, and Dashur. The reason why these 6 are on the list is Abu Rawash is the only pyramid in Egypt, known pyramid in Egypt, that's actually up on a mountain, and it can be seen from space. It is in the northernmost point of the Band of Peace, and is a good example of when we start talking about ancient technologies and the idea that the Egyptians were an advanced civilization that we just didn't understand. So our current understanding of the Great Pyramids, how they were built, was basically just ropes and pulleys. So we have thousands and thousands of workers, or in some cases, thousands of slaves, who are just by sheer manpower pulling these big giant blocks and setting them into place. So Abu Rawash is on top of a mountain, and it's so confined as far as the space goes that you have no room to actually build a rope and pulley system, and you have no room to build like that kind of the crane type of system that they would have used, even back in like the Dark Ages or the Gothic period when they're building the cathedrals.
Right.
You don't have enough room for any of that on there. So this idea of using ropes and pulleys does not work when it comes to actually building this space. And it wasn't like they actually carved this out of the mountain. These are actual stones that were built in this confined space, almost like a kind of an opening, like a niche in the mountain was big enough that they could go in and actually build this from the ground up. Now, the stones show countless examples of modern day machining. So, for example, you'll have stones that have a perfectly drilled hole that go maybe like 7 or 12 inches into the stone, but they're perfectly almost cylindrical, like they've been like cut out with a laser. And you can actually see like tooling marks or like drilling marks. So this idea that they just use a chisel and a hammer to knock these out. In this case, we have more examples that this was the exact opposite. And then in the middle of the pyramid, all the stones in the middle are actually damaged. A lot of them are cracked and a lot of them are blackened. And the only way to blacken diorite granite, so one of the strongest stones in the world, is excessive heating. So in some cases, like if, let's say, like you were to have some type of explosion, like a nuclear explosion or just like a high amount of heat, you would actually cause these stones to crack, and that's where you would get that blackening. So even though there's no reports of like radiation or anything, whatever went off there or whatever happened there basically came from just an excessive amount of heat. We don't know what that heat was, but I mean, just, if you have a bunch of, primitives who are around like a campfire, that campfire is not going to cause that stone to blacken like that. So a very high amount of heat is the only way to get that. Now, if we move on to Giza, the Great Pyramid itself takes up 13 acres on the complex. It's comprised of 2.3 million stones weighing over 200 tons. And the causeway, so you have two different causeways. Both of those causeways, one of them points toward the sun as it sets during the winter solstice. So as you're going up this causeway, it positions you between the Great Pyramid and then the Queen's Pyramid. And so as the sun's setting, you're looking right in the middle of those two. And then the second causeway during the winter solstice positions you between the King's Pyramid and then whatever the third one's called. So there's two different causeways there. And that complex is originally much older than we thought. So the actual Queen's Pyramid is built on this granite slab that is actually probably anywhere between 19,000 to 10,500 years older than what we originally thought. And one of the biggest proprietors of this idea was Anthony West through the weathering of the Sphinx. So if we look at the weathering of the Sphinx, we can actually date that whole complex. So the actual stone slab that the Queen's Pyramid sits on and the Sphinx itself, the weathering marks on that would put it somewhere in between the 19,000 and 10,500 mark, because that's when the last time in ancient Egypt, that's when the highest levels of participation were. And so we can actually, through that, kind of date that site, which modern day archaeology or Egyptologists would tell you it's only like 4,000 or 5,000 years. But if we look at the actual Sphinx or just this, this slab or this, basically base that the Queen's Pyramid is built on, if we look at that complex, it's actually a lot older than that. If we move on to Abu Ghraib, that's actually home to one of Egypt's largest obelisks, which is the base itself is over 65 feet in diameter. It's cut from quartz crystal. And the roundness of the base is so precise that a lot of modern day people and like Christopher Dunn, for example, to him, that shows signs of being laser cut or modern day equipment. To him, you can't get that precise of a cut and that diameter of a stone if you're just using hand tools. So some type of machining, whether it was simple machining or complex machining, some type of machining was actually done to get that the base, that roundness of that base cut out like that. This site's also where they found stone basins that look like giant clock gears. that are made from quartz crystal as well. There's over 200 of these found, but Egyptian antiquity has no idea what they are, what they're used for, where they came from. They just kind of found them around the site. So if you were to go there now, they just kind of have them piled up in front of it.
Does it say how big they are?
They don't. From the pictures, when you look at them, they probably, they look like maybe 12 or 15 feet in diameter.
Holy cow.
They're huge. They're almost like some of the fountains here at town, like that you would throw coins in, like these giant fountains. But they also, in the middle of them, they have a perfectly cut hole in them. And again, to be able to drill through quartz like that, it's hard to do it by hand. And there's 200 examples of these perfectly round holes drilled into these things.
Wow.
Now, if we kind of jump ship to Saqqara is different from all the other sites. Saqqara, instead of being home to like the flat pyramid, so we think of the one that's on the mountain, or the ones in Giza, or anywhere else in Egypt for that matter. All those pyramids are actually flat. So if they had the original casing stones on them, they would have flat sides. All the pyramids in Saqqara are examples of step pyramids, or the flat top mastabas, and those exhibit more decorations and are the actual ones that are tombs. So the only time we actually find a pyramid being a tomb in Egypt is either when we find a mastaba at Saqqara, or when we look at some of the original step pyramids that were first built there. All other pyramids don't show any signs of being tombs, but show more signs of being like some type of machine or like some type of functional device. So the idea that pyramids are tombs only come from the pyramids at Saqqara. Nowhere else in Egypt can you actually say that. Now, when we actually get to the components that make up the Giza power plant theory, so we're going to look at the Baghdad batteries. So the Baghdad batteries are these little clay-like pots, and the inner part's lined with copper, and then there's like this other metal cylinder that kind of sits in the middle. If you actually fill that up with some type of acidic liquid, like maybe like mead or wine, possibly even beer, whatever type of acidic liquid that they would have back in the day. Like today, we could use, I think the modern example that some people use when they're testing them is like orange juice. But that orange juice in between those two types of metal causes an electrical charge. And it's actually shown that with a Baghdad battery that's, let's say, maybe 6 inches tall, 7 inches tall, and maybe like 5 inches wide, that it would create enough electrical charge that you can electroplate something. Now, electroplating is mostly used in gold jewelry, so you would use electricity to electroplate the gold to like another metal. And if we look at gold jewelry coming out of ancient Egypt at that time, all of them show signs of being electroplated, and that's something that wasn't discovered in the modern era till like the 1800s or the 1900s. So we have examples that we have this simple device that they actually use to achieve gold plating. The thing about like the Great Pyramids and some of these other sites is that they're all built on geomagnetic spots, or what they would call ley lines or dragon lines, and the actual scientific term for it is called telluric currents. And so it's where these magnetic centers meet and create this like kind of electromagnetic frequency that's in high amounts. If you look at the Great Pyramids are built from two types of granites. You have the diorite granite, which is what the inner stones are made out of. Now, diorite granite has high amounts of magnesium in it, and these are very conductive stones. And so they actually ionize the air and give off slight amount of radioactivity. Whereas the outer stones, or the casing stones, which the current pyramid doesn't have on it anymore, are less conductive, and they act like an insulator. So if you actually look at the king's chamber and the queen's chamber and all these different shafts that go in and out of the pyramids, they actually act as like funnel, or like a funneling system for ionized air. So as the air gets charged, it creates that current, and it actually moves that current throughout these different chambers and works its way up. And the pyramids are built over natural aquifers, and so when you have these water, like free-flowing water going through limestone, it creates this electrical charge in the water, and then that's actually filtered up through the pyramid, and that's what creates an electrical charge. So if we look at the current state of the pyramids, not only are they missing their outer stones, or what they call the casing stones,
Right.
but they're missing their capstones, which was a like quartz crystal or a gold cap, which also helps conduce energy. And it was theorized that if you look at all the causeways at all these sites, that the causeways would have butted up against the Nile River at one point in time. But over the generations, and this is another way that you can actually guess the age of these sites, is that there's an 8-mile difference right now. And it's actually shown that the Nile recedes so much per year. And so you can actually kind of trace back, that 8 miles and figure out when all these sites were actually built. But at one point in time, they were all butted up against the Nile, causing more water flow or more water coming into those aquifers. And then when you have those casing stones and everything put together, you actually have an energy grid or an energy system that's going through, that area. Now, there's some speculations on what they would have done with that energy system. Some people say that they just used it for almost like modern day technology. So there are like these glyphs or hieroglyphs in the pyramids that have these like weird flower-like looking things that some people theorize were actually like light bulbs or some type of light, and that this free-flowing system could pick that up. Or like you could use this free-flowing system to have almost like wireless communication that you'd be able to communicate back and forth. You could use it for all sorts of things. Now, some of this is not proven. Some of it is. John Burke did a study on the iodized air. So if you go take like a camera, like a modern day camera, and you take flash photography, you'll get orbs. And, he says a lot of people say orbs are just dust, but he believes they'd actually be like electrically charged. And if you look at the older sites, like the Great Pyramid Complex and all these ones that are built along the Band of Peace, these are the ones that are like really fucking old, like 10,000, 19,000 years old. And if you get out when the Earth has its highest peak of magnetism, so like right after 3 a.m. as the sun's starting to come up, you take a photo and you can't see anything. It's nothing but orbs, 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 orbs. But then if you go to like Saqqara, where all these step pyramids are, or where the mastabas are, and you take photos, you hardly get anything at all. So he theorized that these certain like pyramids were placed there for a reason, because it caused this electrical charge, in the atmosphere for them to use. Now, a Frenchman in the 30s called Antoine Bovis developed an idea that a pyramid-like structure could be used to preserve food. Now, the original story said that while he was visiting the king's chamber at the Great Pyramids, he saw a garbage can piled with dead animals, and that the carcasses were not decaying, and that somehow the structure had preserved them. But later on, when you actually start digging into the research of this guy, he actually never visited Egypt at all. He was a dowser, and he, just from looking at the photos and reading up from the time, everything about the pyramids, he believed that that's what the pyramids were for. So he started experimenting and building all these little pyramids out of cardboard, and discovered that if he orientated them just right, that he found that there was positive energy toward the east, negative toward the west, and that the north and south points of the pyramids created a dual and positive, negative in the atmosphere, and that he put chunks of meat, little pieces of fish, fruits, and all this crap inside these pyramids, and found that after being in there for several days, it either made the meat taste better or actually preserved it for long periods of time. Now, a gentleman called Carl Durbel came around in the 40s and actually got a patent number 91304, for a pharaoh's shaving device, which basically is just a paraffin pyramid with a cardboard base to it, and you were to put your razor blades in there, position it magnetic north, and it would actually resharpen the razor blade, allowing you to get more shaves out of it. He actually used the device himself before getting the patent, and was able to take 16 blades, and per blade got an average of 111 shaves by placing them back in the pyramid after each shave. And then with those statistics was able to gain a patent on it. If we go back into, modern day technology, Nikola Tesla at one point in time had used natural aquifers and had built little radar towers on top of it because he was able to show that as water was coming in through the limestone, working its way up through the granite of these aquifers, it actually charged the air particles, and he developed a system of free energy that he was going to produce and give to the world. But him and Rockefeller got into a big argument because Rockefeller wanted to be able to make money off of it. And Tesla's stance was, this is like a natural form of energy that can help everybody. Why don't we do it for the greater good? Kind of goes back to this whole, pyramid power thing, where a lot of scientists have shown that these were devices and not actual tombs. A lot of information right there that I just threw all at you.
A lot of information. Well, coincidentally, I've got info about Nikola Tesla as well, and he's obviously been one of the most famous engineers that we've had in maybe human history with everything he's done, especially the Tesla coil and everything he's done with electricity. But something that I've always found fascinating, and you've probably heard of it too, is the famous Tesla death ray or Tesla particle beam weapon. And so something I've always thought was kind of cool was the whole lore behind that. So basically Tesla was well known for being a genius, absolute genius. The guy could think of something, he could be inspired to make something, and he would just run straight into his lab, for lack of better words, and he would just make it. Sometimes he'd make some of his greatest inventions without blueprints, without designs. He would simply just run in there haphazardly and just whip up something really amazing. So it's rumored that Nikola Tesla, is it Nikola or Nikolai?
It depends on who you talk to.
Split the difference and call him Nicky?
Yep. Little Nicky.
So Tesla always bragged about how he had this gun that he called, everybody else called the death ray or the particle beam. So what they said that he was going to be able to do with this basic, this gun, he says, in 1934, a New York Times article says that the weapon would send a particle beam through the air. It was going to be so powerful that it could take out up to 10,000 airplanes from 250 miles away. Tesla envisioned a world where every country was protected by his death ray. So basically, Tesla believed that war was just ridiculous. There was no reason for it. We should be banding together and finding better ways to, advance human race as opposed to just killing everybody. So he had a dream that basically he could make these rays and then give one of these death rays to every country, every area. And if everybody had the same weapon and it was such a mass weapon of mass destruction, we wouldn't have to kill each other. We wouldn't have to fight, because if you shot me, I'd shoot you, so why would I shoot you? Because you're going to shoot me, kind of mindset. So in World War II, he actually tried to sell his, I'm not going to say patents, sell his blueprints, his plans to a lot of different countries. He tried to sell it to the U.S., he tried to sell it to England, he tried to sell it to the Soviet Union, and even Yugoslavia, and he actually had no luck. There's no dice there. I remember seeing a documentary about the death ray saying that recently, sometime maybe in the last 10, 20 years, they supposedly found a journal from Hitler saying that he had talked to Tesla. Supposedly there were letters in their communication back and forth, and there were actual plans for Tesla to finally just give in and sell the death ray to Hitler. In which case, if he had, it would have changed the entire outcome of World War II. We might not be sitting here having this podcast had things changed. And
oh, no. We would still be having it. We would just all be speaking in Nazi.
Well,
Sprechen Sie Deutsch, Shawn.
With the death ray that I saw, he had another, it was either the same gun or a different gun, and the principle of this is all based on sound waves. The easy way to understand it is if you take a tuning fork, and you tap the tuning fork, and it sends out a sound wave, and that sound wave goes out, hits whatever it does, a wall, and then bounces back, and you hear the noise return to your ears. So he had calculated that if he would hit a tuning fork on a tuning block, and the noise would then go away and then echo back to him, if he could calculate the precise moment that the echo would return, he could tap the tuning fork again at the right moment, thus multiplying the strength of that sound wave by 2. So you would sit there and just tap it and tap it and tap it, and as long as you kept doing it, you'd build up this sound wave more and more and more. Now, it's not just a guy holding a block and a tuning fork. He actually made a gun, supposedly. There's supposed to be documentation of this via the documentary I watched. But the weapon that he made based off of this technology was so powerful, he actually crumbled a bridge with just sheer sound waves. The argument, though, that maybe he didn't really make it was that obviously if you send a strong enough shock wave or sound wave into something, you're going to make it crumble. But if the idea is that you're building up, reverberations of noise, how would that not just bounce off the bridge and then come right back at you and just obliterate the gun and the truck and the tank that you were on? It's hopefully he would have had an idea of how to fix that. But there were rumors also that instead of selling the plans to Hitler, he had actually built the death ray in Long Island, and that supposedly he actually had the working gun. So what's interesting about Tesla is that this was 33, 34. He was famous for not writing down any blueprints sometimes, or sometimes he would just write down partial blueprints to something, but then he'd keep the key factors or key calculations in his head. That way nobody could truly steal the entire plan. So they said a lot of times they'd find his journals and his writings, but he'd be missing, the last 2 or 3 pieces or a couple calculations, and he would memorize those himself. The sad thing about the death ray is that we have blueprints supposedly on how to make most of it, but he never finished out his calculations, never wrote down the final pieces he needed. He actually, I believe, was hit by a car. And when he was hit by the car, he lived, but unfortunately part of his memory was wiped away. Supposedly the myth says that the plan to make the death ray went away with his memory, so we don't have any way to make it. But let's come back full circle and talk more about Tunguska. It's actually one of the strongest rumors was that Nikola Tesla was testing his death ray theory and his particle beam, and that could have actually been what caused the explosion. Not actually a asteroid or a meteor, but actually good old Tesla just shooting some shock waves, and he blew up 80 million trees in the middle of Russia.
Yeah, they had it coming.
I don't think they did. There was nobody there.
So carrying on the idea about being able to use sound waves for like the death ray, there was a guy earlier, probably like the early 2000s, kind of an older gentleman, and he's got a patent on it, but I don't know whatever happened to it. But basically he had like this weird looking, almost like a lamp, but then the head of it, instead of being like a light bulb, was like this weird metal looking like teardrop thing, and you would stick that into water, and then when you flip the switch of it on, it would automatically within a second boil the water. And all it was is when you turned it on, that metal resonated at a certain frequency, and that frequency itself had the ability to instantly boil water. Like somebody in England shot him down, and so like I don't think he ever got it in production or whatever, but that's kind of like an energy saving device, like an easy way to boil water, and he just kind of got turned down. But it just kind of shows you the power of the sound, that we don't know everything that we can do with it. And there might have been like a lost science to it. There are some people who think that the pyramids themselves, they resonated at certain frequencies, and those had the power to heal. And maybe that the Egyptians, instead of using like human slave labor to move these blocks, they actually use frequency to actually levitate and pick up these blocks, or even to carve or shape the stone, that they would use harmonics, and that would actually cut and shape the stone. So,
oh wow! Now you said that Tesla had built a tower?
Yeah, basically on where did you say that the death ray was it Staten Island?
Supposedly it was in Wardensife, Long Island. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Right on.
And so there's around that area, there's like a natural aquifer where the water from the river drains in and goes through. And he built a series of towers, and then across the way he had receptor dishes, and he was able to direct those beams and then to those receptor dishes, and then power whatever that building was. And so basically what you would do is you would find these natural aquifers, set up these towers, and then have these receptor dishes on your homes, and it would freely power your homes. But like I said, Rockefeller was like, no, we got to make money off of this. There was an article in the news earlier this year about a company who made plans to build almost like a natural mountain. I don't know how big it was, but the idea here in the States is our own aquifer, Ogallala, is not replenishing itself enough because we have so many like cities, roadways, where there's not enough actual ground to siphon that rainwater to fill the aquifer back up, that by creating this natural mountain of synthetic granite and limestone, you could use it as a natural aquifer and capture all that rainwater that we're losing and, have access to water so we don't have to worry about drought anymore. So again, you could use that along Tesla's line and we potentially could have free energy.
Well, what's kind of cool is we talk about that island. They're actually building a museum in memory of Nikola Tesla. It's going to be called, let's see here, Let's Build a Damn Tesla Museum was the project. They raised over $9 million let's back up, guys. Those aren't the facts. They raised over $1 million in 9 days to build this thing. So there's rumors that they may actually build a replica Death Ray, but the problem is, like you talked about that giant tower, they were saying based off the plans that people had got to see, the Death Ray was going to be the size of that tower, the tallest tower on Long Island. That was how big the damn gun was going to be, so you can only imagine how freaking big that thing was going to be.
And on a side note, I don't know about anybody else, but because of that movie that came out in the 2000s about the magicians, it had
The Prestige.
Yes.
Fantastic movie.
I will forever imagine in my mind Nikola Tesla as David Bowie.
Won't we all?
Yeah.
As we should. Well, on a parting note, what's kind of cool is Tesla, I think, lived to like the ripe old age of like 81. I think he passed away in 1943. But during a luncheon they were holding in Tesla's honor when he was still alive, they asked him about the Death Ray, and Tesla said, "But it's not an experiment. I have built, demonstrated, and used it. Only a little time will pass before I can give it to the world." And in 1934, on April 7th, 1934, he wrote a letter to the Westinghouse engineers, and he says, "I have groped for years trying to find some solution of the most pressing problem of humanity, that of ensuring peace, and little by little, I have been led to the ideal means of this end. For they," he talks about his death rays, "will afford perfect protection to every country without providing a new implement for attack. The International Peace Conference will insist on its immediate and universal adoption, for as long as the countries are imperfectly protected, invasions are sure to occur." So there you go. He had plans, and I'm willing to believe that maybe we have them. Well, you got anything else for tonight's episode?
You know what? I should put my notes together better for season 2 because I forgot that I was going to talk about some of the orientations of the pyramids and the complexes in ancient Egypt. So like originally you have like authors like Robert Bauval who show that like the Great Pyramid, the King's, and then the Queen's Pyramid, and like whatever the other one's called, they match up to Orion's Belt. And then that if you look at some of these other complexes, you can map them out, and they actually make up the constellation Orion itself. So then you'd have like 2 monuments that would make up the shoulders, the head, and then like the bow and arrow that he's shooting at Taurus the bull, and like the leg, and so the whole entire constellation itself can be mapped out over ancient Egypt. Whereas the 3 Great Pyramids being the belt. And that the actual pyramids themselves at one point in time, the casing stones, so you had the Queen's Pyramid, the casing stones were painted black. You had the white ones for the Great Pyramid. And then the small pyramid, or the Red Pyramid, actually had the red casing stones. The middle star that we see in Orion's Belt, or whichever the one that's red, is it Betelgeuse that's actually red? Like that actually,
I think he was white and black stripes.
Right. But the actual star itself, Betelgeuse, is red. I
think you're right. I believe it's the red one.
And so that matches up. But this other author out of Scotland, he did all this research and said that the other 22 monuments plus the Giza, if you map them out, instead of being like matching up to Orion. They also make the image of Osiris, which is like the head of the eagle or whatever. So there's this idea that all of these monuments, even though they're a lot older, that all these complexes were just being reused and built upon and then changed over time. And that whole civilization is a lot older than what we understand, and probably more advanced than we'll ever understand. So
yeah. Well, I know everybody always says that the pyramids weren't built by humans; they were built by aliens, and they were monuments for extraterrestrial
Stargate.
Never seen it, nerd. But I remember reading not too long ago about, I think it was a French Egyptologist named Louis Caporat.
We'll go with it.
There we go. Let's roll with it. And if not, we'll just call him Nicky. Apparently, in the Great Pyramid, he was doing his Egyptologist thing, and he discovered a secret room that had not been found yet. And what he found was that the room had what he calls an alien humanoid body. He said that it was encapsulated in a crystalline, transparent case. At first, he thought it was a creature that was hibernating or in a state of suspended animation, but then he said he believed it to be a mixture between extraterrestrial and human DNA, and we always hear about that, especially in X-Files even. I mean, that was kind of the big shtick in X-Files. But it said that it was said that the body was said to have been buried with great respect and care. It was accompanied by a number of strange artifacts made of synthetic materials that were not found in any other Egyptian tomb. Also, the source claims, it's unclear what sex the creature was, but we do know it had reptilian-like skin, no external ears, and it had very large, overlaying, almond-shaped eyes. Now, something that supports a lot of these claims is that supposedly a papyrus, or piece of paper, was found near the body, and it read that the being had an encounter with the pharaoh Khufu. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Khufu. Okay, sweet. I remembered something from Fritz's classes. Apparently, it said that the creature had convinced the pharaoh to build a great pyramid as a tomb for this creature, after he announced that in the future there would be more arrivals of beings of his similar species, and they should start preparing by building these monuments to not only encapsulate him, but also be a monument to the newfound beings that would be visiting Earth soon.
Well, there you go. This author out of Scotland, let me get his name real quick because this is important.
While you're doing that, I'll say, just like every other great story that has a lot of credibility, I believe it said the Egyptologist sent off the body to a colleague back in Spain.
Yeah?
He was a biologist, and he invited him to come to Egypt to take blood, tissue, and DNA samples. But instead, his friend came back to Egypt to take blood, tissue, DNA, and blah, blah, blah from the alien. But supposedly when he arrived in Cairo, he was detained by the Egyptian Ministry of State Security, and he was put on a plane back to Madrid. And then, like I said earlier, every great story, the government swooped in, the military took the body, and supposedly took it away to a hidden location. Undisclosed location.
Those bastards.
Yeah, typical.
Yeah, there was that that news story that my brother posted on his Facebook that earlier this year in Iraq, they found the what's what are those fucking things called in the Hindu the Mahabharata, the Vimana, found the Vimana of Zoroaster, and like 6 soldiers like slipped in some weird time warp thing, and so like Barack Obama had to fly over there, and all these the NATO people got together and like, well, what the shit we're gonna do with this Vimana now? But I'm pretty positive, if I remember correctly, that this same story was floating around the internet a couple of years ago when Bush was in office, and we were over there during the war, and it was the same headline, but instead of being Barack Obama, it was President Bush found the Vimana of Zoroaster, and I don't even know. So it sounded like a good story at the time, but then I'm just like, man, this is fucking bullshit. I'm out of here. I'm just closing this news feed. Like, boop, I'm done.
There you go.
But the author of that, the Secret Chamber of Osiris is Scott Cretan. And he actually proposed that when they opened up the Queen's Pyramid, what they thought was the sarcophagus, they actually found nothing but dirt. and that he theorized that the Thoth deluge, that the ancient Egyptians knew about this great flood that was going to happen 19,000 years ago. And so they built these monuments as a way to preserve technology and their civilization. So they filled each one of these monuments with seeds, documents, things that they would need to rebuild society. And that because their natural properties of, preservation, that they could preserve things. There's this, if you go to the Great Pyramid, you can actually find like salt built up on the walls, because the stone has this property when it's iodizing the air, it sucks out all the moisture of things and creates this atmosphere for preservation, and that you could store seeds in there for long periods of time without them going bad or whatever. And so his theory in his book was that they weren't like tombs, or they weren't a power plant, but they were almost like Ark of like Noah's Ark of the Covenant, where they stored things so that they could rebuild civilization after this great catastrophe happened.
Oh, wow.
Boom! Suck on that.
Well, I think for science, you should probably build one of these baby pyramids and see if we can make it do what it do.
So I'm just going to throw like a raw piece of meat in there and see if it goes bad, and we can take turns eating it, or...
I mean, we'd probably reserve that just for you. It's your pyramid.
Okay.
I think you should eat the rotten meat, too.
Or what about we could do the razor? We could do the razor test. That seems like it's safe.
I'm not going to eat a razor either. I'm not going to eat raw meat. I'm not going to eat razors.
What about we can put some wine and give it a year and see if the wine tastes better?
Well, for science.
We'll go buy 2 bottles of wine, keep one outside of the pyramid and one inside of the pyramid, and we'll go from there.
There you go. That sounds good to me.
I mean, since somebody wouldn't jump inside the pentagram, I figured...
I'm not going to jump inside a pentagram either. I will eat your raw razor-filled meat before I jump in a pentagram. You can take that to the bank.
You can take that to the bank.
Well, guys, we have been asking and hoping for listener stories, and by God, for the season finale of Season 1, we hooked one, and I think it's a pretty good one. I really do. As always, we've...
Now, did they email in or did they call in? Because lately some lady whose mom is named Patty's mom has been calling us nonstop for a while.
Oh, man, have there been any more calls?
I don't think so. I don't think Rob has chimed in and showed us anymore, but for a while that's all we were getting.
Yeah.
Was Patty's mom.
Patty's mom. Silly lady. No, this one was written into us. Like I said before, hopefully we get more of these. If you want to send one in, but you're worried about being embarrassed or whatnot, we don't have to share your name. You can always stay completely anonymous. This listener has requested that, so we will honor that request. So I'll jump right into it. It says here, let me get to it real quick, pardon me. One night, when my sister and I were around, I don't know, she was pretty dang young, between 8 and 12. But anyway, we were home alone, living in the country, and we were watching TV. The layout of the house had a family room off to the side. It was a small blue room with sliding glass doors. We also had the long wooden walkway that our dad built that stretched down the driveway. It was probably around 10 p.m., and my sister and I were watching TV, and we heard a loud bang outside on the front walkway. So I got up and walked into the other room. From there I could hear the slow, heavy sound of footsteps, of boots, with a metallic jingly clank of spurs, walking down and up the front walk. It stopped at the front door, so I looked at the peephole. The front porch light was on, but nobody was there. So at this point, I was getting very frightened, and my sister was getting very scared too. I grabbed the phone and took my sister upstairs and put her in the closet across from her room. In our room upstairs, we had those large windows that looked out over the yard southward towards the garage. They were open, and I could hear somebody walking around out back. I could hear the crunching of gravel, and I was sure we were about to be broken into. So I crawled up the lookout so I could see into the garage and under most of the carport, which, by the way, is all dirt, no gravel. The only place gravel was located was right in the clear line of vision between the house and the garage, but no one was there. After realizing no one is there, I noticed I could still hear a mumbling. This guy, I'll call him, was pacing around, unseen yet heard, between the garage and the house, mumbling very loud to himself. But I couldn't make out any words. It was a watery, gargly mumble sound that was more like listening to someone talking through a bathtub. Mom and Dad were called, and they came home and found no trace of anyone having been there. To this day, I still have no idea who or what it was. Yeah, it's a pretty good one, man. That's always the worst, too, when you're by yourself. Of course, your parents aren't home, and you're going to be a little kid, and it's a case of your word against parents' disbelief. So, and it's got to be even worse, too, if you're living out in the country and you're hearing something like that, because where the hell are you supposed to go?
Right.
Into the closet, so... Well, that's a good one.
And the fact that they could
What's that?
The fact that they couldn't see anything is just that weird gurgly sound.
Right. And spurs too. I mean, I'm not saying it's unheard of, but you don't hear. I guess I don't live in the country. Maybe you do hear a lot of spurs, but that was a pretty good one. If you've got more, fellow listener, please send some more in to us. I'd love to hear more if you've got more stories, and everybody else too. If you've got something good to let us to tell us about, and you want us to read, email us or call us. Dang it. Rob's the guy that reads the phone number at the end of the episode.
Yeah. You know what? Listen back to our past episodes. The phone number's on there. Let's go from there.
If you guys got stories that you want to send in to us via email, we'd love to have those. The email is going to be pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. Preston, what's that address?
I don't know what you just said. I wasn't paying attention. Man. But pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com.
There you go, folks. So send us an email. Let us know if you got a story you want us to read. We'd be more than happy to. You got anything else on this roundabout here?
I don't. I think I got a couple good paranormal stories from my lady, but I got to double check and make sure that I can tell them. So for season 2, if I can get some of those, she's told me some doozies. So stay tuned for season 2. Are we going to finish off with a personal anecdote at all? Or
I've got nothing. I'm going to save my aces in the hole for next season.
Sounds like a plan, man. Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So, guys, we just want to thank you for putting up with the first couple episodes while we were getting our feet underneath us and the audio worked out. It's a labor of love and a work in progress, but we're going to come back again for what we are appropriately calling Season 2, Bigger, Badder, and Better Audio. So we got some pretty good stuff worked out for you guys. I'm sure we're going to be tackling.
Are we gonna take like a week off for 2 weeks off before we start season 2? Or are we just gonna jump right back in it?
I think a schedule's a good thing. We're just gonna take our normal 2 weeks, and guys, we're gonna jump right back in about 2 weeks. Now, also, I think Preston and I are gonna start sneaking in some bonus episodes in the off weeks that the three of us don't get together. So look for those. Those would be just, we don't know how long. Could be 30 minutes, could be an hour. We'll just surprise you. But we're going to start tackling a lot better stuff, more research, better research. I think I'm hoping to pick up on maybe Communion by Whitley Strieber, and I'm really hoping we can all jump into some Missing 411, because that stuff really just is pretty fascinating, terrifying stuff. I've actually got a story that I was turned on to by a guy I know who works for the National Park Service. So I've got that coming up on season 2. It's going to be pretty awesome, I think.
And we're going to do some, I think I'm going to make the promise that we're going to get out there and do some field work. So I think that
yes, we should.
With me and my brother, or just me and Shawn, we're going to get out there and do some field work and do some more of the ghosty stuff and share results and go from there. So
that's it, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all of your input and your stories. And we look forward to talking to you guys again in a couple weeks. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.